Well, said it was going to happen this month, and now it's happened. U.S. oil production has now just hit 11 million barrels per day as of this week that's just ended. Previously, it was flatlined at 10.9 million barrels per day for the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, but it has now actually jumped up to the 11 million barrel per day mark, heading up towards its likely peak of 12.5 to 13 million barrels per day. No matter what some, wacky articles out there claim about it supposedly going to reach 17 or even 20 million barrels per day, though some of those people have revised their numbers down. The 17 million barrel per day people revised them back down to 16.1 million barrels per day. So they're starting to reel themselves in a little bit. U.S. daily oil consumption over this week jumped back up from 19.9 million barrels per day, back up to 21.3 million barrels per day. The individual product numbers in that were gasoline jumping from 9.3 million barrels per day up to 9.7 million barrels per day, diesel fuel jumping from 3.8 million barrels per day back up to 4.1 million barrels per day, and jet fuel falling by a little over 10% or so down to 1.7 million barrels per day. U.S. crude oil inventory has actually increased a little bit, a little less than half of what last week's massive plummet was. They increased by about 5.8 million barrels over the course of this week, and now they're up at 411 million. Price-wise over the week, oil was teetering back and forth between mainly $67 per barrel and $70 per barrel, with the last time I checked it last night being just over 68. Natural gas-wise, U.S. production fell from last week, back down to 91 billion cubic feet per day. Consumption, especially as this brutal summer rolls on, is still rising and has now reached 80 billion cubic feet per day. So as you can see, that supply-demand gap is getting increasingly narrow, especially compared to what it normally would be during an average summer. Most of that demand obviously because of the heat coming from the power generation sector, as more air conditioning use means more electricity demand. The power generation sector this week was consuming 39 billion cubic feet per day. Normally, the flatline average is in the upper 20s of billion cubic feet per day. And here's a temperature map from this week, just so you can see. The Midwest especially being roasted. Underground storage inventories of natural gas, obviously because of that narrowing supply and demand gap, did not increase by that much this week. They went from 2.2 trillion cubic feet up to 2.25 trillion cubic feet, whereas normally by the average numbers of the EIA, it would be around 2.9 trillion cubic feet right now. Natural gas prices, despite the harshly narrowing supply and demand gap, over the past several weeks have decreased from $3 per thousand cubic feet down to the upper $2.70 per thousand cubic feet. And over the course of this past week, they stayed between $2.75 and $2.80 per thousand cubic feet. Again, as usual, most of the increasing oil production from the U.S. is coming from additions in the Permian shale formation, which as of the middle of this month has reached 3.34 million barrels per day. On the data released in the middle of last month, it was at 3.27. So on average, it's increasing about 70,000 barrels per day per month. I've seen projection numbers saying that the Permian shale formation will peak anywhere between 4.5 and 7 million barrels per day. Personally, my thoughts are around the 6 million barrel per day range. Some other random assorted oil and gas news. Mexico is right on the verge of becoming a net oil importer. As about 2 decades ago, back at its peak, Mexico was pumping out 3.5 million barrels a day. Well, now in its terminal decline, it's gotten all the way down to about 1.9, and its own domestic consumption is around 1.85 million barrels per day. So most likely by the end of this year, it will go below the red line and enter net import range. Also, another Latin American nation, Venezuela actually being an OPEC member, in true OPEC fashion, apparently has been lying, at least for the past 2 months. They've been claiming that their oil production has stopped falling, and the numbers they've been reporting to the World Trade Organization have them at 1.53 million barrels per day. However, actual analysis and looking at the numbers coming out, that I guess they just failed to hide the way the other OPEC members managed to hide numbers, actually shows that Venezuela is down to 1.4 million barrels per day. So they're claiming to be 130,000 barrels per day above where they actually are. So like I said, in true OPEC fashion, they're lying about their numbers. Not as, grossly or as extremely as the Gulf nations lie about their numbers. Claiming they have X amount of oil and always X amount of oil, no matter how little or how much they produce every year, they just so happen to discover exactly that much more oil so that their number never changes. That's actually like a deludedly funny series of lies, because that they have to know that no one actually believes that, but they're still doing it. So it's kind of hilarious. But that's it for this week. Like I said in my past two videos, on Wednesday I will be catching the train and heading up to Baltimore for my annual summer Baltimore trip. So all kinds of travel vlogs and videos will be coming out with that. Follow me on Twitter, look through my photography gallery, support me through Patreon or PayPal, everything's in the description below. I will see everybody in Baltimore.